Now, it was around 1969 that Martin and myself and Paul Cobbold, who was a bass player, and we formed Karakorum. And as Karakorum, we played all over England for 3 years, including the Marquee in London several times, the Lyceum, the Cavern in Liverpool, and we played quite a lot in Hereford, in the Hereford area, at the Hereford Teachers Training College, and eventually we played at the Hereford Football Ground with also Mott the Hoople there as the main band. Of course, all the best roadies came from Hereford. There was Brian Morgan, Clint, Dave Craig. Those were the lads that used to get us around. And a lot of gigs we had in Hereford were actually at the colleges, and the roadies knew the girls at the colleges, and that's how we got in there. It's interesting, in the 1969 period, and there was the sort of hippie times and the whole psychedelic movement, and it was, sex, drugs and rock and roll to be going on with. There were parts of that scene, man, which were pretentious. So the way to get on was, of course, to pretend. I suppose, in a way, Karakorum was one of the early pretending bands. There's no doubt about that.
I remember going to, I think it was Hereford End. Was it Hereford End?
Yeah.
Where Paul was. And I went to a rehearsal, and the band used to rehearse in an old church. It was like almost like a big space that I think was used as a squash hall or something like that in later years, but that was where the band used to rehearse, and the band would rehearse every day. Whenever they weren't gigging, they would spend all their time just rehearsing. And one of the reasons for that, I think, was the intricacy of the music. It was very complex at the time, and they needed to rehearse in order to be really tight.
Karakorum, we used to rehearse and, practice, we used to call it, and we used to do this just about any night that we weren't doing a gig. Just about every evening of the year, really, we were playing for 3 or 4 hours down at Hereford End in an old stable block. It was like quite a small little room where they used to hang all the saddles and all the harnesses for the horses. And anyway, one of the things we used to say was, well, if something goes wrong, if, for example, lights are going to go out, we need to be able to play this material with our eyes closed. And I said, right, I'll tell you what I'll do one night. So I'm going to rehearse. I'm going to go through the numbers with blindfold on. So I got a blindfold on like this. And I know where the microphone's there, obviously, and I got a blindfold on, and we start rehearsing, and going through the whole act, and I'm jumping about there by the microphone, and then I decide to just jump over to the left a little bit, and crack my head on one of these low beams in the stable block, and the lights did go out.
But the thing that kind of I found attractive about the band was the type of music that they were putting together. And I can't even today really get to the early point of what those influences were, but just taking the name Karakorum. Karakorum was like a capital city of Mongolia in the days of Genghis Khan. And I look at James, and I have these visions of James, even now in my memory. He he even used to look like Genghis Khan. You know, if one can imagine what the hell was, you know, how did Genghis Khan look like? Well, James was him.
Actually, a lot of the funny things that happened in this band were to do with James. It's quite got to say, not least of all me sort of cutting all his hair off in the courtyard where I used to live at Harewood End, and where we used to practice. And he turned up one day and said he wanted to have all his hair shaved. So I had my little battery Phillips razor, and I did the best I could with this extremely bald head.
Well, you know, just after I had my hair shaved off bald, and I still had this beard, so from here going over there was nothing. And Rich Edwards was staying at our house at the time, and we'd never forget, he always said that when we were sat there for breakfast and my mother came in the room and said, "What's happened to my son?" And Rich was just cracked up. He had like really long shoulder-length hair. It was all hippie days. And he said, "It's still your son." And I'm sat there eating a boiled egg and looking like a boiled egg.
I've lost my...
Was he?
I've lost my grip on reality.
So where were we?
Yeah, playing darts. Oh, we were playing with Pato, weren't we?
And the thing is that the music itself was influenced in a way how one would imagine that sort of almost ethnic influence in the rhythms and in the patterns that the band used to play. The intricacies of the drumming from Martin, for example, combined with the almost reggae-ish kind of offbeats and time signatures that James would bring to the band. There used to be this wah-wah pedal that sometimes used to drive me a bit nuts, like as though it would be almost too much, but it would add to the percussiveness of the sound.
Don't be rude.
Whenever you think about ethnic beats and things like that, there it was in front of you, but coming from, if you like, modern day gear at the time, through the wah-wah pedal and through the drumming. And then if you combine that with the style that Paul, who had a particular, you know, he didn't strike me really as being like a typical bass player. It was almost like somebody who had all that rudiments of bass, but played in like a lead guitar type of style. And when I turned up at this church, which was in the grounds of where Paul used to live for this rehearsal, what came across there was that the music the music sounded quite ethnic in a way, and there would be lots of effects. Like, for example, if you were to see some kind of almost Arabic setting in a desert, then you'd hear the wind and the sandstorms and, you know, the sort of sound that comes from nature. And so they used effects like wind, and although that's been pretty much overdone, you know, between those times and today, is a little bit easy, if you like, you know, to do those kind of things today. At that time, that was quite original. And through the effects, through the bow work of Paul Cobbold, you had a band that had its own identity. And to me, particularly seeing them for the first time, what I wanted to see was, well, has this band got the musical integrity of a really tight band, which is what was needed if you really wanted to, you know, go out there and make it at that time. Did they have the quality in their music and their composition, and did they have something within a showmanship aspect?
I remember Tiggy Taylor, that was a drummer from Hereford, and he sat in with Karakorum for a gig, playing percussion, you know, playing the old tablas. And he was telling a story where he was just settling in, playing and concentrate on the music and getting into Karakorum, and suddenly this guitarist rolled across in front of him from right to left. And he thought, oh, what's that? And he thought, well, I better carry on, concentrate on the music, keep in the rhythm, get into the music, man, you know, everything will be all right. And 5 minutes later, he sees the guitarist rolling left to right across in front of him again. And then he began to realise, he said, that this Karakorum, there's something else going on here. There's something else going on here which is not really normal.
Amazing.
What? Who?
Who, all of you. You
Who?
especially, of course.
What was the name of the...
Karakorum.
Yeah?
Karakorum. Have you forgotten the name of your own band? I was there almost from the beginning. I listened to a lot of your
To describe
writing.
a sort of typical gig, people in the very early days, in the first gigs, really didn't know what to expect. And I was booking this band into all sorts of venues, from, I don't know, could be a miners' social club one minute, to a sort of, really cool club somewhere in London, and or in a college or something like that. Totally different audiences. And of course people didn't know what to expect from the band when they saw the band for the first time. Sometimes they went down absolutely a storm. Other times I think people couldn't get it, and they didn't understand, well, what's this about? Give me some Elvis, or give me some, sort of commercial kind of music. But that wasn't what the band was about. On stage, and again, in the early days, it was a three-piece band, very unique. Paul playing bass. He would combine his bass work with a bow. It was a Hofner violin bass guitar, which was sort of suited the type of style of his playing, particularly with the bow, because he would get this kind of cello kind of sounds coming out of it, and he used to use effects pedals as well. So it was almost like creating an orchestra on stage as well, to some degree. James would be his usual self, prancing around the stage.
Bald head.
We did a gig at Lyceum with Mott the Hoople, and Mott the Hoople that day had just taken charge of this brand new, super duper humongous WEM PA, and all the sort of Watkins electrical music people were down there. And I think Charlie Watkins himself might have been down there, and because it's got a rotary stage as well, so it's quite a wide stage, big PA either side.
This
So
image of Genghis Khan comes up again. I remember seeing him, and one day he'd shaved his head completely bald, and he had this beard, and so you had a completely bald head and this big massive
About
beard.
halfway through, I remember looking across. I was on Martin's left, and I looked across to Martin, and then looked beyond Martin to James, and no James, mind, but there was guitar playing, but no James to be seen anywhere at all. And Martin just looked at me and shrugged his shoulders, and then people over on the right-hand side of the stage were laughing their head off. I think the roadies from Mott's band. And what had happened was that James had done a forward roll, as I think he sometimes did on gigs, but just turned a blind eye to it. But this time he fell off the stage and landed in the pit behind this monstrous PA on the stage right-hand side of the stage. And we just saw this guy sort of crawling out of this pit, carrying on playing as best he could. And I can't remember the song we were doing, but that's one of the funniest things I can remember happening.
I remember he used to always wear a striped t-shirt, like a t-shirt. It reminded me a bit like one of these French onion sellers, without the berry. And
I think we chucked the berry.
Karakorum were playing in London, and we stopped the night there, and we got the van parked in Abbey Road police station. We thought it'd be quite safe. Anyway, went back for the van in the morning, and the van had been broken into. They'd nicked most of the stuff, including the guitars and a load of leads and various other things. And it was a bit of a problem, because that night we had to play we had to go down to Bournemouth, and we were a bit stuck really. We were playing with Alexis Corner that night. On the way down from London to Bournemouth, we had to gather some gear together, including guitars and leads and jack plugs and God knows what on the way down. Anyway, eventually we got to Bournemouth, gathering a load of stuff together. We were pretty late really because it was a difficult job. So we got on stage. We were up first before Alexis Corner. We had to get all the PA and the equipment together and so on. And then we started to realise what we hadn't got. So we did as much as we could really to get the gig going that night. And I remember the guy that was sort of introducing us, he had to kind of explain to the audience why we were late and so on and so forth, and I think the audience accepted it. But there we were getting all the stuff together. We didn't have enough jack plugs ready for the PA system, so I always remember Brian, he was stuck behind one set of speakers. I was stuck behind the other set of speakers because we were short of God knows how many jack plugs, so we pushed the leads into the back of the PA system, and we sat there all night, each of us, one behind one set of a stack of speakers and then me behind the other, holding the things in just to get it working. And it was just ridiculous. I've never been so deaf after that. Yeah, something else.
And I remember that time when we had all of our stuff stolen out of the van in London, and we had to get down to Bournemouth, and okay, replacing the equipment and the cables, that was a problem, but I actually had a guitar stolen. And I'd never ever forget the Alexis Corner that we were touring with, and he actually lent me one of his Telecasters for 2 weeks, and I went off. I remember we had a few other extra gigs, and so I went off round England one way with Alexis's Telecaster, and Alexis went the other way. But of course, we trusted each other. A wonderful guy. He would help anybody in the music business at that time. And of course, we met up a couple of weeks later. There was the guitar in the case. Thank you very much. It was the only time I actually played a Telecaster on stage.
And of course, Martin. But the thing about Martin built up a lot of respect, I think, particularly amongst other drummers. He became almost like a drummer for drummers. And I remember making quite a lot of... so I'd read somewhere in one of the music papers like Melody Maker or The Enemy or something that Keith Moon had been in the audience somewhere. I think it was either a Lyceum gig or a Marquee gig, I can't remember. But he'd really come to see the band. You know, the other bands were coming to see Karakorum, particularly in London, to check them out. And there, one night, one of these gigs was Keith Moon. And he was in awe of Martin's playing. And there must have been some journalists, you know, some music journalist at the club at the time, because in one of those kind of brief news kind of items that these music mags and papers used to have, you know, the music scene in brief, as it were, you'd get these little name check sentences, and there it was, you know, Keith Moon getting off on Karakorum, you know, and Martin Chambers on drums.
Karakorum was a very, very interesting bunch of people. And I remember once getting up to London about midday, very keen. We played at a place called the Flamingo, I think it was called. Or was it the Whiskey A Go Go? No, it was the Temple. It was the Temple in Wardour Street. And I think it may have been called the Flamingo or the Whiskey A Go Go previously. It was about 1970-71, and we got to this club at about midday. It wasn't open, so we hung around, eventually got our gear in there at about 5. We didn't have a penny, so we were starving. Usual. And we were on the bill with the Pretty Things. And we didn't know what time we were on. We thought maybe early evening, something like that. And we went on stage at 5:30 a.m. So at that point we'd been there about 16 hours, hanging around, and I had a conversation with the wonderful Phil May about what a good idea it would be to have an inflatable drum kit, because the drum kit always took up so much space in the van.
With the Pretty Things,
there in the Temple Bar, at Wardle Street, London. And all-night job with Sassafras, who Karakorum played 3 times, 6 o'clock in the morning. We come out, and Brian turned around and said, I thought this drum was taking quite a problem getting out of the club, and I managed to get a hippie tangled up in his hair. Drum. It was Harry, I think you need to look beyond yourself. He said, peace man, this was good.
You know, we used to, when we were rehearsing Karakorum, and we used to train ourselves to, if anything strange happened on stage, that we would carry on playing, or the rest of the guys would carry on playing if something was faulty or whatever, you know. So anyway, there we were in Worcester on stage, and I used to spontaneously have these ideas when I was on stage to, I don't know how it happened, but I just got this thing where I would spontaneously do something, you know. I decided to spontaneously faint. So we were playing away there, and in the middle of this lead guitar, and Paul's hammering away with the bass there, and Martin's giving it all that stuff, you know, and then I suddenly, without anyone knowing, because it's just spontaneous, I just decide to faint. So I bend my knees and collapse flat on my back. So I'm lying there. Of course, the band carries on playing, but and I'm lying there with the eyes closed, thinking, I'll just do this for a few moments and then I'll get back up. But of course, unbeknown to me, in the first row of the audience was a trainee nurse. And before I knew where I was, the band's still playing, I got my eyes closed, and then next thing I do, I open my eyes, and this girl has jumped up on the stage and she's giving me the kiss of life. So then I'm thinking, well, this is all right, you know, and look, I can see Paul over there still playing away, and I'm lying there having a kiss of life from this girl, and she's trying to loosen my clothes. I'm thinking, well, end of gig. But that was partly what Karakorum was about, was spontaneously falling off stage or doing a forward roll.
You jumped around a lot. Martin used to sweat. His lovely long blonde hair. You used to sweat quite a bit too, but you were jumping up and down, and you'd be on your knees and you wouldn't stumble. You're a showman. Always have been, always will be. Awesome.
Sometimes we used to play in London with Colosseum, John Heisman's Colosseum. That was also a very good band in those times. Chris Farlow was the singer with them at that time, and every time we turned up, and Chris Farlow would see us and he'd say, here they come, Krakatoa.
Gig in Bristol. Turn up. James has got something on wheels. And it's either Rob or Tim that's with him. And they're pushing this equipment across the hall, one side to the other. And they couldn't find the stage. They were just meandering all over the floor. But after we'd done before we'd done the gig, went and played darts with James. And he said, why have we got to throw these darts down this tunnel?
Well, you know, when we were down in Swansea, and that was with Pato, and we'd already been on the stage, and the end of the night, Rich Edwards and me, we decided to go wandering down the corridors into the dressing room just to check if we'd left any cables.
I don't remember that. You said about it.
I'll say it again, but you don't remember it.
We went to get those cables.
No, I don't remember that.
So we wandered down this dark corridor, the other band's playing, it's all exciting going on, you know, it's a whole Woodstock. And so me and Rich walk into the dressing room, and we're confronted. There's 3 guys against the wall, spread-eagled, like they do on those police films. And there's a police dog and half a dozen policemen, and they've actually they've raided the dressing room, and they've climbed in through the window. come in through the door, dogs, the whole thing, and they busted the dressing room and got these guys who were from the audience. I don't know what they were doing in the dressing room, but they got these 3 guys spread-eagled against the wall. So they turned to me and Rich Edwards, the police, he said, what are you doing? And we said, we're the band. Oh, that's all right. You can carry on. It was like the band, we were professional musicians and we were doing our job. Police are doing their job. That's cool. And so we had to look round for the cables and we buggered off.
I do remember when we're doing the gig, James is doing his own gig, looking at the lights up on the wall, Great Western Night Show. I look down and Rob Cook's asleep over the mixer.
I remember that down in Bristol, that university there where we were a bit spaced out, we could well say, and at the end of the evening we managed to get all the equipment back in the van, and we were all sat in the van there, you know, we got the roadie there at the steering wheel about 1 o'clock in the morning in the parking place outside the gig, and just ready to go, and just try to focus ourselves and get ourselves, you know, we're gonna moving away now back into the normal world. And just at that moment, someone's tapping on the window, and we wind the window down, and this guy goes, "Excuse me, has anybody seen my third eye?" Talk about the young ones, I tell you.
We played with Pato again.
Pato wasn't there on that night.
Oh, wasn't it? Who was it then?
Paladin.
Who?
Paladin.
Paladin. Mike Paladin.
Of course, there's the Heads of the Valley Road, where I almost froze to death one night when the Bedford ambulance we were travelling in as the group van broke down, and that wonderful man Brian Morgan went all over the place trying to get this or that to help us out, and hours went past, and I wrapped myself in what I used as the mat for the drum kit, which was underlay for a carpet, and I wrapped myself in that to try and keep warm, but it had no thermal qualities at all. And eventually an AA wagon turned up with Brian beaming from the... I got in the cab, and luckily it had a heater, and it was fantastic. That was a serious time. The Heads of the Valley Road late at night is a very lonely place.
I remember when we were down on the Heads of the Valley Road in that old ambulance, and we were stuck there all night. It was the highest point of the Heads of the Valley Road, and it was, well, it was raining a sort of a sleet, you know, you were like really up in the mountains there, and we spent the whole night up there. And I do remember Martin being in his wrapped up in his carpet underlay, and I think at one point we actually got him out the back of the ambulance because we didn't have a lot of room in the ambulance because it was just totally full with equipment, and we got Martin on our shoulders and tried to slide him in between the roof of the ambulance and the big bass cabinet that was there. There was just about enough room like this, and we were sliding this body of the drummer wraps in carpet underlay literally in above the equipment, you know, so that the rest of us had a little bit of room to get in there. In fact, talking about this, later on when we had a normal transit van to get around in, and to get room with us all sat in the front of the van, for me, they had just an old car stool sitting on the floor in the back of the van with the equipment. It wasn't even bolted down. And I spent many a journey around England in the middle of the night or through the fog or the rain. It didn't really make much difference because I couldn't see out the window. I was actually behind all the rest of the guys on this little seat, and when we went around the corners, you know, all the equipment would slide over a couple of feet to the left or to the right, and I'd be sat in this little seat sliding around in the back of the van. Got quite used to it, really. It was quite normal for me to be put in there.
Juicy Lucy, and they had a hit with Who Do You Love? And it was a big night, and we were given, I believe, 12 bottles of Newcastle Brown in a crate. And Paul didn't drink, or James didn't drink, I think it was Paul didn't drink. So I drank about 4 or 5 of them, and I remember lying on top of a piano watching the band in the wings, lying on top of the piano. And also it was the first place I signed an autograph. Somebody asked me for my autograph on the staircase going down.
I didn't play Durham.
Didn't play Durham?
No!
So you never met Juicy Lucy?
No!
It was all sex, drugs and rock and roll, luckily enough. And, well, there was the one story I do remember where there was, I've borrowed a bungalow from this friend to take this girl there, you know, and we got the girl there on the bed, ready, as we will say, for action. And I'm in the bathroom, and I come out the bathroom, and I'm, as they say in Afghanistan, I'm ready to deploy myself strategically. And of course nobody told me, and the guy who lent me the bungalow, he doesn't tell me that the plumbers have been in there a few weeks before, and they've been doing things with the floorboards, and there was a loose floorboard. So I come round the bed on the advance, as we say, and suddenly a loose floorboard. You know, I go down about 2 meters, so from the girl's perspective I've disappeared, and the end of the floorboard comes up and nearly cracked me on the should we say in the well, what should we say, nearly split my bollocks apart. Anyway, enough said that the girl couldn't see me. I just disappeared from her, and I'm actually up to my knees in the floor, and there wasn't a great deal of action after that. Unfortunately, had to make a strategic withdrawal.
We were driving back from London, been at the 100 Club in Soho, wherever it is, Wall Street, and then going past through Whitney, and this police car was behind us, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I could see it was coming up behind us, and it was going to stop us because it had the old doodahs going. And I suddenly said to everybody, right, anything dodgy you got, get rid of it. And there were bits of things going out the window like that. And then I had to jump out of the van. I parked it, jumped out of the van, and I got a big folder with all the details, insurance and you know, all the other stuff. And I went to the car. I went to them rather than them coming to us. And mind you, that wasn't the only time that happened. You know, I mean, that happened several times, I have to say.
I thought, when they played at the Marquee, it was the Marquee, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I thought they were ahead of their times. I thought John Peel would have loved to play their records if he only had the opportunity to hear them. Because I thought they were the band at the moment in time that was Karakorum. And I think if they ever got as far as John Peel, he'd love to play them. And that would have been the making of them.
It's rather strange. I remember when we were in Portsmouth one evening, and we actually were playing with John Peel, the well-known DJ, the alternative DJ of that time. And before we got all the gear set up in this place, but all the lads, all the roadies, everyone, we were out up on the top of a multi-storey car park playing football about 10 o'clock in the evening. And John Peel was playing with us, and I always thought to myself, I remember thinking at the time while I was tackling John Peel, and I was just thinking, why, if only I had a cassette of Karakorum in my back pocket, I could slip him the cassette and take the ball off him and, you know, get through. Well, I never did. I remember years later, Richard Branson from Virgin Records was visiting a record company where I was working, and he had a helicopter there in the field. I remember running down through the bushes and climbing over the fence and running down to the helicopter pilot, and I actually did give him a demo cassette to Richard Branson's helicopter pilot. And I must say I never heard back from them after that. They probably dropped it out when they flew away. Probably some guy got my cassette on his head. Demos from heaven. Little tribute to Dennis Potter there. I slipped in. Did you see that? All the Ross artists. Eh? Ross on why? I'll never know why.
I remember a particularly drunken night at Teachers Training College with the Karakorum. We had a Colton speaker which was huge, and I managed to fall off stage with it. Oh dear dear.
You were the main act at Cheltenham Town Hall, right? And I can remember you said to me, go and see who is the the support act. So I went out and I asked the chap, and he said, oh, it's some American country singer, Chris Christopherson or something like that. And I said, never heard of him. And that's what he did. All he did was come on stage. He had a guitar and a microphone and a little 30-watt amp. And that was it.
I remember Karakorum. I remember 5 minutes of it.
What?
I remember when we were down in Bristol.
Which particular? What, the
Bristol Polytechnic.
Oh yeah.
And I spent most of the act watching the wonderful light show. I had my back to the audience, and I spent most of the act watching the back of the light show.
Yeah.
And when I got off, we'd actually played for an hour and a half, and when I got off, I thought it was only been on there 5 minutes.
Do you remember also we did a gig up at the training college in Hereford, as it was then, the ladies teachers training.
Oh, I remember
college.
that, yeah.
And do you remember up in the barn? Do you remember who our support act was?
No.
There's a black Irish bass player with a
No, I don't remember that.
Thin Lizzy.
Was that Thin Lizzy?
Yes.
You're joking.
No, I'm not joking. The next night we played with them down in Newport Art College, and they supported us again down there.
Oh, well, I don't remember. See,
You
I
remember
told
that?
you I don't remember
And
half of it.
JV was done. John Vigar,
Yeah,
our manager, our
yeah.
erstwhile manager, was also down
Yeah,
there. and,
Major Blunt.
gave us an almighty bollocking after the gig. He said we thought we played absolutely crap, and that other band that was playing as a support band were going to go a lot further than we ever did.
And he was right.
To me, it was like here was a band that had all these ingredients: identity, the integrity of their music was always uppermost, I think, in their mind, and performance. And when you went to see Karakorum at a gig, you didn't quite know what was going to happen, but there was always an element of excitement, whether it was through the way that they presented themselves and put themselves over on stage, and the tomfoolery, if you like, that used to come from James, which took a little bit of the seriousness away. Clearly they were a very special band, and I think that there's a lot of opportunities that were missed, but I think the biggest thing for me, I think, was that people within the music business missed their opportunity, I think, with that band.
We were doing a one gig, where we had a big build-up before we went on stage, and we had the opening number with tremendous power chords, and Major Blunt, our manager, he'd already gone. Bless his heart, he'd gone on the stage in front of the curtains and gave the audience a super build-up for Karakorum, and then here they are, and the curtain draws back, and the lights are up, and we're ready, and we come forward with this master power surge chord, and what happened was the whole electricity of the entire building went out. So after this big build-up, we're on the stage in the dark, and there's an entire audience in the dark, and that was the end of that build-up. We had to go off the stage into the dressing room, wait till they'd sorted the whole thing out, and we had to do this massive build-up and introduction all over again, but of course they'd already seen us, hadn't they? It wasn't quite the same.
It's always a big challenge, to get Karakorum noticed by lots of people, particularly in the media and within the gig circuits. And one of the biggest venues for launching a band back in those days, around about 69, 70, was to get a gig at the famous Marquee Club in Wardle Street. And the guy that used to run that club was a guy called Jack Barry. I just phoned him up and I said, look, Jack, I really want to get my band in at the Marquee Club. He said, if you want a gig here, you better get here by 12 o'clock now.
And I thought, hell, maybe this is what it takes to get your band in the marquee. So anyway, I used to have an old Morris Minor, a really battered old car, and drove all the way to London. And I got there around about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, he said 12 o'clock midday. And as I got there, what he said was, I can't believe that you made that journey. It was about 4.5, maybe 5 hours journey. And he gave me the gig. And that was really the sort of launch of Karakorum in London.
And when I'd had that hair done and was bald, and we played with Slade, the band Slade, and we were in the dressing room there. I never forget, Noddy Holder comes up to me, Noddy Holder, the singer with Slade, and he comes up to me, he puts his hand on my head, he said, "Look what we got here, lads, got a grandad skinhead. Never seen anything like it before." And that was another, I'll never forget old Noddy Holders. They were cracked up about that. You never played Durham?
I never played Durham.
Yeah, we used to go like this. Durham, 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 Durham.
Durham, 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 Durham.
Yeah. You play that?
No.
Karakorum was not really so much of a band, it was more of a sort of university of sex, drugs and rock and roll. And I've got 3 diplomas hanging on the wall here. I studied good.
And nobody else can sound like Karakorum.
There's not a lot I remember about Karakorum, but what I do remember I'm going to tell you now.